This presentation is about the Learning Progressions Framework. In a nutshell, it is a framework. 3 frameworks actually, each framework showing a progression for the 3 core learning areas of reading, writing and maths. The framework for each learning area has aspects. Every aspect has steps, or what I refer to as stages. Every step or stage has a descriptor, and these descriptors have been broken down into learning intentions. Every learning intention has an example, and every example has an ARBS lesson. There is a tool to record what stages students are on, which most of us know as PACT, the Progress and Consistency tool. A PACT scale score is calculated from the stages a student is sitting at for each aspect. This score gives an OTJ as to where the student's New Zealand curriculum level is. PACT is compatible with most student management systems such as ETAP and KMA. PACT data can be administered across a kahoiako, which means student stages can be transferred to the next teacher, irrespective of the school. So that is a brief description of what the LPF is. So you might be asking, why? Why should teachers implement the LPF PACT system? Quite simply, in my opinion, I believe the Learning Progressions Framework is the Holy Grail. Now here's the thing, it does not replace your teaching methods. You can still teach the same way you always have, whether it be theme-based, whole class groups, cross-curricular, etc. This is because it is a framework for years 1 to 10, very much like how NCA is a framework for years 11 to 13. A framework gives clarity on what to teach but does not stipulate how to teach. Another thing is, it is easier to assess. Learning Progressions Framework is both teaching tool and assessment at the same time. You can see currently that there is a disconnect between teaching and assessment in the primary sector. We have a myriad of teaching methods and resources for reading, writing and maths. They are often not specifically connected to the ever-increasing list of assessments. This creates a problem of what do we focus on and how much time do we focus on it? When we choose to focus on assessments, we may find that the things we spend a lot of time in class on aren't even in the test. And if we start teaching to the assessment, are we covering the curriculum faithfully or are we creating gaps? And this is why the LPF was created by the ministry, to solve the disconnect that has been created by differing resources and assessments. The LPF also has easier reports. Push the button and you get a progress report printed out showing the latest achievements of the students, the expected trend of the student in comparison with peers, a description of the student's working level with descriptions of the levels above and below, the graph showing the stages of each aspect, and an OTJ of the New Zealand curriculum level. So no more churning through loads of paperwork to figure out an OTJ. It is all done automatically. It also has easier grouping. The stages of the aspects are your groups. The learning intentions in each stage are what your groups work on. Another important factor is teacher integrity. The framework makes it easier to see what you are not covering. It challenges us to have integrity in our teaching and not just stick to our strengths, which leads us to visible learning. Everything is clear for the students. Students are given their own LPF to track their learning and therefore can see what it is they have already accomplished and the new things they need to work on to move forward. They can look at the student exemplars for each learning intention to make comparisons with their own work. This prepares them for NCA when they start looking at the requirements for each standard. And its student exemplars. Individualized learning plans. Every student will be able to work on a learning intention that is pertinent to them rather than a group or class. which should create the teacher as a facilitator. The teacher role of being the content provider is inexcusable in the digital age. As a result, students today have become lazy, often waiting for teachers to tell them what to do and spoon feed it to them. Employers are finding it increasingly hard to acquire resilient workers who think critically. With the LPF, teachers can stipulate less of what the students should be learning and put the onus on students themselves as to what it is that they should be learning and how they should learn it. This will create student agency. Students will be able to choose their own learning intention across the LPF as they see fit without the need to ask the teacher what they should be doing. Self-management creates accelerated learning. As a result of students working on learning intentions that are specific to their personal learning needs, there is no longer time wasted learning things that they already know. This leads to blended learning. With the LPF being shared online with students, there is no longer the restriction of only doing maths in maths class, for instance. Students can work through the learning intentions online at any time. The days of schoolwork and homework cease to exist as the LPF is both, which helps with parent input. What happens in school is no longer a mystery to parents, as they can now see what the child needs to work on. Parents do not need to understand the learning intentions, they simply need to help their child find ways to understand the learning intention. Transferable standards. The best thing about inheriting an LPF class is the work has already been done with their groupings for all the aspects. No need for any testing, you are good to go from day one. Clarity for NCA teachers. The LPF is the only framework NCA teachers need to know in order to understand the teaching and learning of students coming through from the primary sector. Planning is so much easier. If your school wants detailed planning, then a daily plan would be what allies you are doing in each lesson. A weekly plan can be what aspects you are doing. Term overview can be the themes and or aspects you plan to do. Resources put in accordingly. Personally, I don't believe planning should be reported, as the LPF Pact is a report, both formative and summative, and more importantly, it is immediate. Ministry endorsed. Pact is a secure MOE system that is administered by select MOE IT staff. Their role is to support schools maintain the system and investigate issues. Being a government system gives teachers security with support and continuity. Finally, I have to mention what happened on Accord Day 1. When we had our first Accord Day, the new NCA was introduced. There were 4 recommendations for how primary school students should prepare for the new NCA, and at the top of the list was the LPF and PACT. This brings us to our final part. How do you implement the LPF into a classroom? Is it difficult? Well, anything new is difficult, but the rewards of implementing the LPF far outweigh the initial work setting it up. What you need as a teacher: the 3 LPF docs, the 3 grouping docs, PACT tool access, ARBS access. Students need the 3 LPF docs. So you play a slide called Introducing the Framework. Once you are ready to begin, there are 2 approaches. Approach 1. Learning intention focus with content to fit. Systematically tackling the aspect stages learning intentions. 3 weeks per aspect. Group students into stages and record impact. Coverage of all aspects usually completed middle of term 3. Rest of the year students will work freely on their weaknesses. Approach 2. Content focus with learning intention to fit. Tackling content and linking learning intentions to fit the content. Continue teaching as normal whilst trying to identify the aspect stage and learning intentions being covered. Put student names into stages as you cover the curriculum. Enter the stages of students into PACT. Try to find content that allows you to cover all of the LPFs. Students color in learning intentions as you identify them. You may also have a combination of both approaches, 1 and 2. Every teacher is different.